Hey, sports fans, welcome to the Atlanta Sports Unlimited channel with Tom Pollen. I'm Dave Holcomb here for another episode of NFL Jocks and Pigskins. All NFL free agency today. It's a really exciting week with hearing all these names moving around to different teams, Tom, and we're going to break down all the big names, where they landed, who's still available. We'll touch on that if we have time. But a lot of names have signed this week and a lot of fantasy implications as well that we'll get into. Whose stock is rising and who is falling with their new locations, new teams.
Yeah, it's amazing how many moves have been made this week. It seems like even from the tampering period, the illegal legal free agency period, heading into today, and it's just been nuts around the league with players changing teams. So I got a few things to say about it myself as far as what's happening here in Chicago. But I know, we're covering the league, so let's take a good look around the league and see what's happening. And it's going to be interesting because I would imagine a lot of this has a lot of great fantasy implications.
Yes, and a lot of it will still has to play out because we don't know 100% how these players are going to be used on their new teams. But right. Yes, a lot of fantasy implications with what's happened over the last week and what's going to continue to transpire through free agency. So we're going to get to all of that today as much as we can in an hour. We hope to hear your comments. Send us your comments on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. We'll read them on the air while we're live the next hour. You can tweet at Tom and I, at TJ Pollen, at DM Holcomb, and Chris is with us again today.
Yep.
Chris gave us a new background as well. And Chris, it's always great to have you on.
Yeah, loving that background. That's nice.
Yeah. You got to come down here and come to Mercedes-Benz with us.
Yeah, I really do. It would be a great place to see and a great place to watch a game, it looks like. So yeah, at some point I do have to do that.
A lot of my experience at Mercedes-Benz is in the press box, and I haven't been to any other press box at any other NFL stadium, so I don't know really how it compares, but the press box is really nice at Mercedes-Benz.
Is the food pretty good?
Yeah, food is excellent.
Food is excellent?
Food is excellent. They have everything. They have salad bar. They have main courses. They have an ice cream machine. They have a popcorn machine. They have brownies, cookies, soda. No alcohol, but that's the only thing that's missing. They have everything else.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. That sounds like a great way to watch a game. You might as well be in one of the luxury boxes.
Yeah. Some of the media people, I think, literally eat their way through the game. So
they're really showing props to the media people there.
Trying to keep us happy, I guess.
I know.
I thought wide receivers would be a good place to start today.
Okay.
We talked so much quarterback over the offseason, and there's so many great wide receivers around the league, but also that are free agents this offseason. And I thought we'd work our way back, running back, quarterback, and get to some tight ends at the end of the show.
Right.
If there's time.
Well, there was one significant tight end moves that I think not only is going to be big for their team, but big in fantasy. It's not necessarily New England bringing back Cam Newton, but the fact that they signed Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. It looks like they're getting back to a style of ball they played earlier in their dynasty period, where you had Gronkowski and Hernandez, running down the seams and really making it tough for defensive backs to figure out, who do I cover? Where do I go? It was murder on secondaries. That, not any one signing that stood out, but I think is going to be make a real impact in the NFL and consequently fantasy.
Yeah, what's difficult about talking about free agency moves from a fantasy perspective is I don't want to criticize players from a fantasy perspective and have people listening think that I don't like the move from the team's perspective. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think it's a better real life decision for New England bringing in 2 tight ends and run the system that you said than necessarily fantasy, because those 2 guys probably are going to split the targets and split the receptions, split the red zone opportunities. So when you're drafting this August, you're going to kind of have to decide, well, do I want Jonnu Smith? Do I want Hunter Henry? And with both of them new to the system, not familiar with Cam Newton, it might be a toss-up at that point, other than historically Hunter Henry is probably a little bit more skilled, but Jonnu Smith came onto the scene and played really well last year. So
yes, he did.
I like this move for the Patriots for sure, but from fantasy, I think it might be a little bit of a headache deciding which tight end is going to show up which Sunday.
Okay, granted. You know, that's as I said, that's why you're the fantasy guy. You know about these. You think these things through.
I do.
I'm the guy who just criticizes and is a royal pain in the you know what, just because of some of the things that have happened in these free agent period.
Well, now that you brought up tight end, let's go over that position real quick to start. The tight end that I think could have the biggest impact from a fantasy perspective is Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold signed a 2-year deal with the with the Carolina Panthers, going from the Cardinals. And I'm going to pull up his stats real quick here. But I believe he came onto the scene and was a bigger part of their offense towards the end of the season. Last year, he had 31 receptions, which was more receptions than he had in his first 2 seasons with New Orleans and Arizona. Kind of an unknown guy, but with Carolina, they're trying to they're going to stay with Teddy Bridgewater, I think. And he didn't do a great job of getting the ball down the field. He's losing his top wide receiver with Curtis Samuel.
Right.
So I think that tight end position could be a security blanket for him. And maybe Dan Arnold is – I'm not saying draft him as a top 5 tight end. I just think that he could be a sleeper and somebody you get maybe as a backup tight end, and he could become a reliable starter maybe by midseason next year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a big signing. Do you really think they're going to move forward with Teddy Bridgewater?
I don't know. I mean, there hasn't been – well, I guess they're in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, which seemed to get a complication this week with the civil lawsuit that's against him. And admittedly, I haven't read a whole lot about that yet. And
neither have I yet.
I can't comment on the civil lawsuit yet with Deshaun Watson. I think maybe we'll discuss that next week. But I think for Carolina, yeah, I'm not sure they're 100% off the Bridgewater train. So I think if you're a dynasty owner or you're just thinking about your fantasy redraft league for this fall, you're working under the assumption that Bridgewater is going to be the starting quarterback in Carolina. That could change, but I think that's what you have to assume at this point.
Well, he does have familiarity with Matt Rule's offense.
Yeah.
And I thought Bridgewater and Matt Rule made a pretty good team early in the year last year.
They did.
Seemed to fall apart a little bit later as the season went on.
Yes.
But,
remember Christian McCaffrey barely played last year. I mean, think about what that offense will be when McCaffrey's playing. I mean, he's arguably the best running back in the league. So that offense could look completely different if McCaffrey's healthy, and Bridgewater will look better.
Both as a runner and as a pass catcher with McCaffrey.
Right. Yeah. So, absolutely.
Yeah. Who else we got now? Let's keep moving forward.
At tight end, we got a comment here. Falcons House from Marcel Calloway. Thanks for watching the show, Marcel. Send us your fantasy questions or any comments, reactions you had to free agency, fantasy or otherwise, doesn't matter. A couple other tight ends that were in the list I'm working off of is the top 101 free agents at NFL.com.
Okay.
And there were two other tight ends in that top 100. Rob Gronkowski staying in Tampa Bay. There's really not much to analyze there. It's going to be a lot of the same with him and Tom Brady. And Gerald Everett moving from the Los Angeles Rams to the Seattle Seahawks on a 1-year deal.
Who was that? That last
Gerald Everett.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Rams are going to try and build something around Matt Stafford. You know, this morning has been a strange one for me. I don't know. Maybe because Zozo hasn't shown up for the show yet. She's a little late for the show. So
on her trailer.
So where were we?
With Everett going from Los Angeles to Seattle, this is another one that we could probably say put the analysis on the shelf. It's all about whether or not Russell Wilson's in Seattle. I mean, that's
and I think he's going to be.
I think so too, but you got to wait and see, I guess. There's not Everett isn't a huge name anyway, so it's probably not worth trying to overanalyze his value at this point when the quarterback situation could possibly change. So that's really all for the tight ends that I saw, and I think wide receivers. Let's get to them because there were a lot bigger names there. According to the top 100, the top 2 wide receivers that were free agents going into this offseason were Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin. Both were tagged by their teams.
Right.
So let's go with the next 4 names on this list: Kenny Golladay, Will Fuller, Curtis Samuel, and Juju Smith-Schuster. 2 of those guys going to different teams. One surprisingly going back to his team last night. One of them still available.
Who went to his team last night? I didn't hear that news.
Juju Smith-Schuster re-signed with the Steelers.
Did he? Because I thought it was pretty well established that he was not going back to Pittsburgh.
That's what
I'm very surprised.
Yes.
My look through my NFL sources, I'm reading through Pro Football Talk and NFL.com. I didn't see that news.
Yeah. According to Ian Rappaport, Smith-Schuster was down to Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Kansas City. And according to Rappaport, the Chiefs and Ravens were offering about $13 million for 1 season. The Steelers offered $8 million, and Juju picked Pittsburgh. And his because of the way they structured the contract, I believe his cap hit is under $2 million. So
that's outstanding.
Yeah, I mean it was a great move from a real life standpoint for the Steelers, and I think this is good for Juju owners just because we're going to talk about a lot of guys moving teams, and there's an unknown with someone going to a new city, a new playbook, a new system, and I think I'd rather have my star or my fantasy starter stay with what he's familiar with, and that is the advantage that Juju will have. Only for 1 more season, but next year we're probably talking about a different quarterback for the Steelers anyway. So if Juju re-signs again with Pittsburgh, he's going to be in a new situation with a new quarterback. So clearly I think Juju wanted to chase a title based on the 3 teams that he was looking at on a 1-year deal. He wants to win a championship, and he took less money to stay where he's familiar and play with Big Ben, Roethlisberger 1 more time.
Yeah, well, they're both familiar with each other. And Marcel Callaway has another question. Is Matt going to stay in the house?
I think he means Atlanta, right?
Matt Ryan. So.
His mansion in Atlanta, probably. I don't know.
Yeah. Definitely Matt Ryan stays in the house. He's going to be in Atlanta. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So,
yeah, I completely agree, and I'll have to look up the exact details. But Matt Ryan restructured his deal this week.
Yes, he did.
So the cap went way down. Where they save about $14 million, I believe, on his cap hit, at least for 2020. But it kind of makes it more difficult to cut him, from what I understand. So to me, that means that Ryan is definitely staying in Atlanta.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was no doubt in my mind even before that. So one question I have for you based on fantasy, also based on quality of the play we're going to see this year. do you think it's going to be easier for some of these players who are changing teams now that we're going to have mini camps and we're actually going to have a training camp this summer?
Right.
Does that make it easier for some of these players who are coming through? And that goes back to Bridgewater. Didn't have a real training camp with Matt Rule. But a lot of these players are finally going to have a training camp to get a lot of these, to get the system under their hands, to at least get some knowledge about the system before, week one, when they're just kind of thrown out on the field and saying, okay, it's time to go.
Two thoughts on that. Yes, I would say to your question, I think players changing teams really seem to not be able to hit the ground running right at the beginning of 2020. Tom Brady is an example. I mean,
it took
the
a while.
Buccaneers. It took them a while to get things together, and they were able to do that, and they became the champions. So I do think these free agents we're talking about for fantasy, you can be less hesitant to draft them or start them week one because they'll have a preseason and training camp to get ready as normal. However, we also saw a lot of scoring, especially early in the season last year. And scoring goes up pretty much every year. However, it really seemed to explode because the lack of training camp, lack of preseason hurt defenses more than it did offenses. So you could see just overall less fantasy scoring in September because defenses catch back up or are hitting the ground running, so to speak, with after training camp, after preseason. So it might hurt fantasy overall, but I think to answer your question, yes, these free agents that are changing teams are more likely to have great seasons than they did in 2020.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of the line of where I was going to be thinking, kind of lines of where I thought it would go, but just wanted to see what you had to say about it.
Yeah. So Juju back in Pittsburgh. I think that's a good thing for the Steelers and fantasy owners. The two names that I said in our top four receivers, not counting the two that were tagged, that changed teams: Will Fuller, a 1-year deal with the Miami Dolphins; Curtis Samuel, a 3-year contract, which is one of the longer deals that we're probably going to discuss today, to be honest, signed with the Washington football team.
Yeah, it seems like wide receivers are not getting, not drawing, well, they're drawing interest, but not interest as far as length of contract and dollars that I think they expected going into this offseason.
I think that's because there's just so many of them. We are blessed in the NFL today with so many great pass catchers and wide receivers that it actually hurts them because you can just go find another one if one guy plays hardball with you in a contract situation.
Well, that's what they were saying about running backs for years now too. So might be that fact that it's starting to catch up to wide receivers a little bit. Might be one of the reasons why Allen Robinson signed his franchise tender so quickly.
Maybe,
because he realized that market is not being very supportive of what I want.
Yeah. I think the Curtis Samuel move to Washington is interesting. You have Terry McLaurin there, who has really blossomed into a number one wide receiver and borderline number one in fantasy. So Samuel is kind of in the same situation. And how do they mesh together? Who gets more targets? And then you have a new quarterback there. I know we said we weren't going to talk about quarterbacks until later, but one of the notable quarterback signings is Ryan Fitzpatrick, who appears he's going to be the starter in Washington. So how does he mesh, and how quickly can he get on the same page with McLaurin? And then also now Samuels. The talent is there, especially now with Antonio Gibson in running back too. That could be a really formidable offense. It
really could. And with Ron Rivera in place, that defense is gonna be showing up. They had a good defense last year.
They did, especially up front. Really good front.
Right. Oh, exceptional front.
Yeah.
And putting an offense together the way they are, they might be a real player come December in the NFL, in the NFC East. I mean, the NFC East is so open right now. You can make some significant impact with just a few players, with just a small improvement in that offense in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, definitely being in the NFC East it gives you the hope that you can win that division easily and have a home playoff game. And I guess that didn't really help Washington last year, the home playoff game. But it's still, would rather be playing at home than on the road. So in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's I just can't find words today. Sorry, this is one of those days.
No, that's all right. But I guess as is
normally
true.
Normally I have more opinions than you can deal with.
It's true. Yeah. But with this is true with most offenses. It comes down to the quarterback, and some casual fans might turn their nose up at Ryan Fitzpatrick. But remember, he was playing really well when he got benched for Tua. That was kind of controversial that he got benched.
It was, but of course, Miami had to see what they had in Tua too.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I don't want to second guess the decision necessarily. I'm just saying for Ryan Fitzpatrick and his fantasy value, or the fantasy value of Washington's wide receivers, I wouldn't. I actually think Fitzpatrick is probably better to be throwing passes to them from a fantasy perspective than Alex Smith.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think Fitzpatrick still has a lot under the hood as far as being able to play. He's an older quarterback. You got to remember. Sometimes, this catches up with the quarterback quick. Sometimes they can make adjustments. And remember, Fitzpatrick has not always been a top quarterback. He's been up and down in his career.
That's true.
You never know what you're going to get with Fitzpatrick. Is it going to be Fitzmagic or Fitztragic? That's always what you're looking at with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
So
you're right. 9th team for Ryan Fitzpatrick.
That's amazing.
And I don't think he had a kid in Miami over the last 2 weeks, or last 2 years. Barry Sims chiming in. What's up, y'all? Rise up. I'm a Falcons fan, Barry. We'll talk a little more Falcons later.
We'll be talking. Yeah, we'll get to the Falcons. Don't worry about that.
Yes, we're breaking down wide receivers at the moment. But I heard this a couple years ago. So Fitzpatrick had 7 kids, and all of them were in 7 different cities where they were born. Really? Yes.
I didn't know that. I never heard that one.
Yeah. It was. Wow. They talked about it when he was in. I think he was in when he was in Tampa Bay. They were saying this. And I don't know if he ended up having. I don't know if he ended up having an 8th kid in Miami either of the last 2 years, but I'd like him to, maybe have another kid in Washington.
You never know. Hey.
Him and Phillip Rivers are competing for that. They should get their kids together and each have 11 kids and have Fitzpatrick family against the Rivers family. How great would that be?
That would be outstanding. I would pay for that. That's a pay-per-view right there.
Put that on TV as opposed to the Pro Bowl. I'd rather watch that.
In place of the Pro Bowl, you got it. I'm all for it.
Yes. Yes. But back to the receivers here. Kenny Golladay is the best name still available. He's the guy that I said has not signed yet. And I think, with Matt Stafford leaving Detroit, all due respect to Jared Goff, I think it's best that Kenny Golladay goes really almost anywhere else than Detroit. He had he was injured in 2020, but he had a really good 2019, and I think he could really be a fantasy force in the right situation with the right quarterback.
He can't be. That's the main problem, his health. If you can keep him on the field, he's an outstanding wide receiver. He can make a difference for a team. The last I saw right now, he's seems to be close to signing with the New York Giants.
Giants. Okay.
Yeah. He's been in East Rutherford the last couple of days. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because the Bears are also players in the Galladay sweepstakes. But the problem you look at is both those teams that seem to be front runners are two teams that really aren't solid at quarterback. I mean, you got Daniel Jones in New York, and now you got the Red Rifle in Chicago. So,
yeah, not ideal situations. Although, I think I'd rather have him in Chicago if I had to choose either of those two. Dalton it seemed like he was at least able to get Michael Gallup and some of the other Cowboy receivers, at least get them the ball occasionally. And I don't know if we can say that with Daniel Jones.
I'm surprised the Giants still see him as their number one starter and is the guy that they're going to move forward with.
Yeah.
I don't see it, but that's me. I'm also not a coach. I'm also not, a general manager. So I just act like one. But
you just play one on TV.
Yeah, I play one on TV. But Jones, I don't see it. I don't see the improvement that you expect to see out of a young quarterback after he's been on the field for a couple of years.
I agree with you. I wasn't a huge fan of making him a top 10 pick, and he hasn't given me reason to change my opinion. So right. I would agree with you there that that Galladay playing with Daniel Jones is not ideal at all for fantasy owners. Let's move further down this wide receiver list. Another notable name changing teams: Corey Davis, 3-year deal to the New York Jets. We also had Nelson Aguilar signing a 2-year contract with the Patriots. Yep. John Brown going back to Las Vegas on a 1-year deal. Marvin Jones, 1-year deal in Jacksonville. Emmanuel Sanders got cut, signed a 1-year deal with the Buffalo Bills. Rashard Perriman, 3-year deal with the Detroit Lions. Out of that list, what sticks out at you?
Nothing spectacular. Nelson Aguilar going to New England again tells me that I think Belichick is moving on. From what he had during the Brady era, and they're starting to rebuild an offense, and bringing in Aguilar and the 2 tight ends shows you what they're trying to do. They're trying to get back to more power based, more dependable wide receiver core than they had last year for Cam Newton to work with. Emmanuel Sanders, I was kind of surprised to see him get cut. Because New Orleans is going to need wide receivers. They got Winston and Taysom Hill are going to be fighting for that number 1 quarterback spot. And I don't know. I might pay to watch that on TV too.
I looked at Sanders as just a salary cap casualty. We talked all about that last week, that the Saints were way over the cap. They just I don't know if it's necessarily a reflection on Sanders' play as much as they could not afford him anymore. Having said that, I don't know if he's a fantasy starter necessarily anymore. He is going to a good situation in Buffalo where Josh Allen has really blossomed. They have the number 1 wide receiver. So, I mean, Sanders at his age, I don't think he would have been a number 1 receiver no matter where he went. But he could be a very good number 2 or maybe even a number 3 at this point. And if you're playing in a deeper league, you have a deep bench, or you have 3 starters at wide receiver, he could be useful in that offense that should continue to develop under Josh Allen, who's really an MVP candidate going into 2021.
Yeah, he really is. Having Stephon Diggs up there is a really big help for Sanders. He's going to see more one-on-one. He's not going to see. He's not the main guy. He's going to get his chance to I think get more targets. Even with Stephon Diggs on the field, you're going to be looking at him a little bit more. Maybe not as the long range target that you used to see him as, but still a very capable target and a good landing spot for him and for the Bills.
And depending on what the Buffalo's running back situation, where that goes, I mean, they throw the ball so much.
Yes.
There's plenty of targets to go around, even with Diggs.
Yes, there are.
From a football perspective, Buffalo probably wants to run the ball a little bit more, and I'm not saying they shouldn't. They should. But if they continue to throw as much as they do, that'll be good for Sanders' value, fantasy value.
I still think they do need to establish a running game before you can really count them as a Super Bowl contender. You can't throw the ball as much. You can't close games if you can't run the ball in the third and fourth quarter. Yeah, and that's the problem. You have to be able to close. Once you get the lead, the passing game has been great at getting them the lead and putting them up in games, but it makes it tough to close if you can't run, if you can't pick up first downs running, if you can't keep moving the sticks. Incomplete passes, stop the clock late in the game. You can't be doing that. You can't allow that to happen. You're allowing other teams a chance to get back in a game when you should actually be shutting them down.
The last wide receiver I want to discuss is Corey Davis, because he really had a very good season. Some people would say finally figured it out, if you will, with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback the whole season long, and going into last season, A.J. Brown was the focal point for the Titans, their passing game. But Corey Davis really became a good reception receiver, but he also, he had a very healthy yards per catch average as well. But what I want to say is, unfortunately, now going to the Jets, all of that goodwill that he built up after being kind of a bust early in his career, that goodwill is now gone with Sam Darnold or whoever ends up being his starting quarterback. That is going to hurt. I think it'll hurt his value unless a rookie comes in and really lights up the place. I don't see Davis being able to repeat what he did in 2020 this season.
Well, Lance Zierlein, who I place a lot of faith in when it comes to mock drafts and player evaluation, seems to think that Zach Wilson is going to be going to the New York Jets.
Okay.
So
that could change Davis's value depending on how Wilson plays, obviously. And that's why, this is a tricky, it's fun to analyze this early, but it's tricky because it's like trying to give a grade before a paper is done. It's not really done. The paper hasn't been turned in yet. So I guess Davis is another wait and see, but I don't love him going to the Jets from a fantasy perspective, at least not yet. Depends on who's that quarterback is.
Well, I like the potential he has. He could be, he's coming in a position to be a top wide receiver with the Jets. Because you're right, he did figure it out last year. But, that's the thing. In my mind, a quarterback makes his receivers, not the other way around. Receiver does not make the quarterback. Quarterback makes the receiver. So That's where you're going to have the problem is, Sam Darnold is not going to make it. Zach Wilson has the potential, but it's going to be hard to say. I think the Jets signing him because they feel he has the potential to be a good partner to whoever they bring in at quarterback.
And this is another situation where I like the signing from real life. Yes, I think it's a good signing for the Jets. But it's another situation also where, Davis was the number 2 with A.J. Brown getting all the attention. Now he's the guy in New York. How does he handle being game planned against every single week, double coverages, being the focal point of the passing game? It'll be harder for him to produce. That's outside of who's the quarterback. So I don't love it from a fantasy perspective, but yeah, for the Jets, yes, it was a good signing.
Right, exactly. So we'll see what happens with the Jets. There's still a lot of moves that have to be made by the Jets. I have a list of what the Jets have done, but I still think it depends on who they get at quarterback. That's going to drive how the Jets perform next year if they can get out of the bottom of the AFC East finally, which is, plenty difficult to do. Well, it was difficult to do bad enough when New England was running the thing, but Buffalo isn't going anywhere now. So,
and Miami is better too.
And the Jets really, I'm looking at what they've done so far. They really haven't, other than Corey Davis, they really haven't made a real impact in free agency yet that I thought they would, considering the amount of money they had going into it. So they did have quite a bit of cap space. And I think more looking towards building around a quarterback, and they're not looking to contend this year, but just looking for improvement this year. And that's what these guys are going to do for him.
That does it for wide receivers, but I mean, there's a lot of really good names still available. I'm sure we're going to talk more wide receivers next week. I mentioned Galladay still out there, T.Y. Hilton, who's not really the same as he was a few years ago, but still a quality receiver.
Quality, yeah.
Sammy Watkins is out there, Antonio Brown, if you're willing to bring on that baggage, Cordell Patterson.
Cordell Patterson, yeah.
So there's a lot of other names. We'll be talking wide receivers in the weeks to come. Not as many names at running back for sure. It's a much shorter list of guys that are in the top 100. And a lot of these, the top two guys at least, re-signed with their teams. Aaron Jones back to Green Bay.
Yes.
Chris Carson back to Seattle. I think that's good for both fantasy owners of those players because, again, they don't have to consider what they're going to be in a new team, a new system. Jones, I'm somewhat concerned because there's a lot of cooks in that backfield, but they still are going to be an elite offense, at least for as long as Aaron Rodgers is there. And Jones is going to be the top. As long as he's the top back, he's borderline number one running back in fantasy.
I like what they got in Jones. I really do. I think he's going to be quality. He can work out of the passing game too. So, which is always something what you need with Aaron Rodgers. But I think Jones is worthwhile. I don't see that as a bad move for Green Bay bringing him back. He's a tough back to bring down. He runs hard. I mean, he's not your prototype running back as far as size, but all you can ask for is the production that you get out of him. I think he's, with the weapons that Green Bay has on the field, I think he's a good complement.
Yeah, I agree. I wish they would use Jones a little bit more.
Yes.
I think he has the ability to be a real bell cow, and they just don't use him that way. They don't run a lot because they have Aaron Rodgers.
They don't use anybody that way. That's the problem.
Yes.
This is an offense designed around Aaron Rodgers, and that's the way it is. I mean, you go where Aaron Rodgers takes you, and that tends to rely less on the running game than maybe Jones would. Jones will get more chances at another spot, but he knows where he's got it good too. He's always in the play for a Super Bowl appearance with Aaron Rodgers. So sometimes where you got it good and you stay there.
One thing I should note that I had to double check: Jamal Williams is a free agent, and I don't think Green Bay is going to re-sign him. So that does open things up a little bit more for Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon has come on strong at the end of last season, and he's going to assume the Jamal Williams role. But at least you don't have three mouths to feed there. So it's really going to be Aaron Jones 1A and A.J. Dillon 1B in that backfield.
Jamal Williams has signed with the Detroit Lions.
Has he? Okay.
So, yeah.
He was not on my list. He's not in the top 100 free agents.
Okay.
Overall.
Yeah. Not anymore. He's not a free agent. He's signed.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Well, that's interesting because, I mean, I guess the Lions aren't going to have Adrian Peterson again, but they have DeAndre Swift, and now they have Do they still is Kerryon Johnson? Kerryon Johnson's also.
Kerryon Johnson's still there. Yes.
Yeah, so they have a busy backfield.
Yes, they do. Very strong backfield. It's going to be who's Jared Goff going to throw to? So that's going to be the question.
Yeah, right.
You're not paying Jared Goff to hand off. So, I mean, at some point you got to find receivers for him.
I think the most interesting running backs signing this week was Kenyon Drake to Las Vegas, because Drake was a number one running back in Arizona. Only spent one season there, one full season there, I should say. Was with the Dolphins before that, and he had a lot of ups and downs. He had that great Monday night game against Dallas, and if that's the only game you saw of him, then you probably think he's a lot better than maybe he actually is. But he struggled down the stretch, but still was a guy that got 200 carries last year. Now he joins, I almost called him Oakland, Las Vegas, where you have
You're going to be doing that for the next couple of years, too. So.
yeah, a long time. And Josh Jacobs had 300 touches. So, and Drake and Jacobs do similar things too. Jacobs had 12 touchdowns. Drake had 10.
10. Mm-hmm.
They both had, so they're both decent goal line backs. Jacobs averaged 3.9 yards per carry last year. Did much better as a rookie with 4.8, but was more of a 3 yards in a cloud of dust goal line back kind of player last year at least. Drake was similar, averaged 4 yards per carry. So I'm very curious how this match is going to work out. I think it could help Drake because he seemed to kind of lose steam towards the end of the year, but he's very similar to Jacobs. So how does this marriage in the backfield work?
Well, you're talking about Josh Gruden here. Not Josh Gruden, John Gruden here.
Right.
I get my Grudens mixed up occasionally. And that's the thing. I can never figure out what John Gruden is trying to do from one minute to the next. I would think you'd want a back that gives you maybe a little better, a few more options when it comes to the pass game. Give Derek Carr a couple of other places to go with the ball.
Yeah, neither one is a pass catcher.
Right. So it's hard to see how both these guys. This is an instance where, we were talking about tight ends with New England. Well, with Las Vegas, how many, you don't have enough footballs to go around. How many touches are each of these guys going to get?
Yeah.
And who's going to come out being the predominant back? I guess, basically this is going to be, two players filling one running back position. As far as style, they'll be in and out of the game, and it'll run that way. But I'm surprised they didn't bring in somebody else who maybe gives them more options. It seems like they're a bit more limited with Kenyon Drake, who I think is an effective runner, but I think Drake probably could have found a better situation for himself.
I have Drake on my dynasty team, and I would have liked him to find a better situation for himself. It's not ideal for his fantasy value. I do think it hurts Jacobs more, though, but we'll see. Drake was already kind of sharing a backfield with Chase Edmonds, so he's used to that. But it could hurt Drake more than I'm saying, because he becomes maybe only a 100 carry guy, if that. But Jacobs really didn't share the backfield at all last year. 273 carries. Devontae Booker was second on the Raiders with 93 carries.
Yeah,
that's going to change. It's going to be more like 200 for Jacobs and maybe 150 for Drake.
For Kenyon Drake, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
and you're getting the same players, the same guy on the field, no matter which one you put out there.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, both if it actually ends up that way, 200 and 150, both guys are going to have fewer carries than last season. But
Yes.
And unless it's a situation where maybe the Las Vegas is hoping that, okay, if we don't wear down Jacobs, we don't wear down Drake, we're gonna get more bang for our buck. They're gonna have higher yards per carry average. But
That's the only thing I could think of.
Unless that happens, I mean, there's going to be a lot less production for fantasy owners,
Right?
Because both players were reliant on getting a lot of touches because those yards per averages were not that good.
Right. Yeah. A lot of red zone touches, a lot of goal line touches.
That's the other.
You're going to be splitting the touchdowns in between them.
Right.
You know, it's a rough thing. It might be good for Las Vegas because, you know, as you say, you're going to have two fresher backs by the end of the year. But, you know, again,
it's a fantasy headache.
It's a fantasy headache. It's terrible for fantasy, but some would say, you know, the hell with fantasy. You know, it's dependent on the team winning. But, you know, some people think too much about fantasy. But
we don't say that the hell with fantasy on this show.
We don't say that here. No. No, we don't say that here. Oh, God. I'm having a great show today.
But yeah, I what we're saying is the same, that it's a tough situation. It could end up working for Las Vegas, but for fantasy, it's hard to see. It's hard to see either one benefiting from having the other.
Right.
Philip Lindsay actually surprisingly left Denver. They did not. They chose to let him go, and he signed a 1-year deal with Houston. That's the other. Well, him and Marlon Mack also re-signed with the Indianapolis Colts. That's my notable running back list. A few names still unsigned, and I guess we'll add Jamal Williams to that list as well. You brought him up. He's going to Detroit, which is definitely notable because as we can talk about that maybe next week. I want to get to other topics, but Detroit's got a busy backfield, and owners that have DeAndre Swift would have preferred just ride DeAndre Swift. Why are you bringing in another veteran back?
Yeah, I don't know how many carries Williams is going to get next year, though. He really didn't get as many in Green Bay as I thought he would. I think everybody thought he was going to be kind of the man in Green Bay before the start of last year, and Aaron Jones kind of took that mantle away from him. So it's going to see how it develops. I don't know if Williams will get as many carries as everybody thinks he will. We'll see how that goes, how it develops.
Well, I think that's good for Detroit, to be honest, and I think that's good for fantasy owners too. Detroit was better when DeAndre Swift was touching the ball 15, 20 times. That's what they need to do. And I thought with Matt Patricia gone, we're done with giving 38-year-old running backs the ball. But I don't know. I mean, not that Jamal Williams is 38, but apparently we're still going to have this same situation where maybe DeAndre Swift isn't the focal point of the offense, which is just insane to think about. I mean, Detroit has a really great back in DeAndre Swift. He needs to touch the ball a lot.
Yes, he does. And I'm with you, but they got a new coach, and we're going to see how many ankles they can bite season because he's big on ankle biting.
I forgot about that.
I can't get that opening press conference out of my head.
Good reason.
So I mean, Detroit wants to be this big physical team next year. They want to really knock people over. I mean, this coach has just got testosterone oozing from his pores. He's just ready to.
Maybe they plan to run the ball 60 times, and then each running back gets 20 carries. That'll work out well. Not for the Lions probably, but for fantasy, our running backs.
Right.
We got about 10 minutes left in the show. We're discussing all things free agency in the NFL from a fantasy perspective. but we want to get to some Falcons news because we've gotten some comments from some watchers that wanted to hear some Falcons stuff. And you can keep sending in those comments. We love them.
Yeah, we love them.
Tweet at us at TJ Pollen at DM Holcomb. So some Falcons news from the week. We mentioned Matt Ryan restructuring his contract. The Falcons also added a safety from the Raiders, which was I mean, they have a lot of positions of need. We discussed last week, just 41 guys on the roster last weekend. So there's a lot of positions of need, but safety was one of the big ones. And they bring in Eric Harris from the Raiders. And they restructured Dante Fowler's contract, which was something else that you've been clamoring for this offseason. And that it's a very interesting incentivized contract. Did you see these
I haven't
details?
seen the numbers yet. No.
So he was supposed to be making $14 million with $6 million guaranteed. The salary now is only $6 million, but they've added $4 million in incentives. If he gets 5 sacks, that's $1 million.
Okay. And
then every additional 2 sacks, he gets an additional $1 million. So we're talking about after 5 sacks, $500,000 per sack. Sign me up for that. Can I pass rush?
Hey, I know. Yeah, no kidding. I'll take that. What the Falcons did with Dante Fowler is what the Bears failed to do with Quinn, who was a terrible pass rusher. He had a lot of potential. I mean, been a great pass rusher throughout his career. The Bears signed him up to a 5-year deal, and big money, big starter. Robert Quinn, big starter, big producer type money, $14 million a year, and ended up not reworking that deal, and are still in salary cap hell, put themselves further in salary cap hell by signing, putting the tag on Allen Robinson, and ended up having to cut Kyle Fuller, who was, a former all-pro cornerback, not Pro Bowl corner, all-pro cornerback.
Yeah.
And, you put yourself in these salary cap positions, and it looks like the Falcons are actually making some positive moves to
get out of salary cap.
To make up for it.
Yeah.
The Bears are sitting with Robert Quinn on their roster. He's going to make $14 million next year. They're still sitting with a left tackle who is not performing anymore. Tight end Jimmy Graham, who's basically old as dirt. I mean, he can't run. He can still catch passes, but he can't run. And they end up, instead of redoing some contracts or releasing some players, they release their Pro Bowl quarterback or their all-pro cornerback.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm pretty disgusted with the Bears this year. Plus, they signed the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton, which now
I'm just laughing because
Falcons, you got Matt Ryan still. Matt Ryan still has game left. I can't say that Andy Dalton still has game. The thing is, and by the way, Ryan Pace did not even bother to show up for Andy Dalton's press conference. So Andy Dalton was all alone by himself in this press conference. No Pace, no Nagy.
What does that say?
Yeah, exactly. What does that say? The word was that the Bears had made they had met with the Seattle Seahawks kind of on the sly. Ryan Pace and Schneider from the Seahawks. And it was going to be the Bears were going to give up 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and 2 starters. Nobody knew who the starters were for Russell Wilson. And Pete Carroll came in and said, no, we're not doing that. Pete Carroll said no, that we're not trading Wilson. So that's why I said earlier, you're not going to see Wilson going anywhere. If he wouldn't go for that trade. But I think one of the starters was probably Fuller.
Yeah, that makes sense. If they're going to cut him anyway.
Right. But the thing is, you didn't have to cut him. Why are you cutting a player who thinks is a leader on this in the locker room?
Yeah.
And a leader on the field. Why are you cutting him? Everybody, every team, all 32 teams knew that salary cap was going down this year. Okay, we were dropping. The smart teams worked their way under the cap, did some re-signing, did some restructuring, knowing that the cap is going to increase over the next few years. Is all this TV money that's going to be coming in. I mean, the NFL just made some incredible television deals. So making cap, even with these restructures, is going to be a little easier moving forward. But the Bears sat on their butts and did nothing. And that's what really has driven me crazy this week, which is not a very long drive, more of a short putt. But, you have Quinn, you have Graham, you have a guy like Charles Leno, who has not been as effective at left tackle as you need him to be. And you cut your Pro Bowl, and then you give your Pro Bowl defensive lineman one of the best three techniques in the league, Akeem Hicks. You give him permission to make a trade. So you're tearing apart your defense instead of actually making some moves to do something smart. Ryan Pace has just screwed up this team ever since he screwed up, traded up to get Mitch Trubisky, took the wrong quarterback. And that gets the managers fired. But for some reason, the Bears are going to keep going with him. The speculation going into the season was that Nagy and Pace were on one-year deals. They were on prove-it deals. The moves they've made now make it sound like they're going back into rebuilding mode, and they're not. And Pace and Nagy are not making moves that make you think they're on one-year deals. So it's a bad situation here in Chicago. I think Falcons fans actually have it pretty good. I think they're moving in the right direction. They got a strong general manager. They got a good basic a guy who knows what he's doing on offense, doesn't try to be too fancy on offense. I really like that when you have a guy who's not looking to show you how smart he is all the time. And sometimes I get that out of Matt Nagy, that he's trying to show you how smart he is. Yeah. And that's what I like about what the Falcons are going to move forward with. You don't have a guy who's looking to impress anybody. The guy who's looking to win games, and he'll do it however he needs to do it. Yeah. So, it's just a ridiculous thing in Chicago. And we're back in rebuilding mode. I think the Falcons are actually in rebuilding mode, but, the arrow's ticking up for them. The Bears are going straight to the basement. The arrow's going down. This is just terrible. If you're going to lose Akeem Hicks and Kyle Fuller, this has been a defense that was good enough to win a Super Bowl if you had the right quarterback. They could never figure the quarterback position out. Now they're going to tear apart their defense because of the salary cap, instead of making the moves they needed to make under the salary cap. So I'm done.
You sure? You got it all out?
Got it all out.
All right. So, but that was an interesting,
So you don't want any Bears players on your fantasy team next year?
Probably not. Although, Allen Robinson, I talked about this last week, how talented he is, and he overcomes the quarterback shortcomings.
Yes.
I will think more about Andy Dalton for next week's show. I don't hate it as much as you. don't get me wrong. He's not a guy that's going to win a Super Bowl. He's much better served as a backup.
Yes.
But for fantasy purposes, he's probably better than Mitch Trubisky throwing the ball to Allen Robinson.
Yes. Anybody's better than Mitch Trubisky throwing the ball anywhere. So.
Okay. All right. But going back to the Falcons as we wrap up the show, things are pointing up, as you said. I like the changing the Devontae Fowler contract, and we joked about it, but he's got to be really motivated this year. He's going to get $1 million for every 2 sacks he gets above 5. I mean, what is more motivating than that? So if he doesn't get to 7 to 10 sacks this year, I mean, he probably never will again. The incentive will definitely be there for him to play well, to get a contract for next year, and to get all this bonus money. Right. And they've restructured Matt Ryan's deal. They now know that they have the plan at quarterback in place. And yeah, it is rebuilding because there's so many holes at other positions. But
yes, there are.
You have an aging veteran quarterback, so it's more of they're trying to reload on the fly than necessarily rebuild. And a lot of that's going to come through the draft because they don't have the salary cap space to do it in free agency. But if they have a solid or great draft, then they will be competing in the NFC South next year.
Well, you're going to get a good idea of what you can expect from Atlanta's scouting staff going forward. Depending, because, first round is, you want Pro Bowl caliber players, especially where the Falcons are drafting. Second, third, and fourth rounds, you're drafting your starters. Fifth, sixth, seventh rounds, and undrafted free agents is where you're building your depth. We'll see how it progresses for the Falcons. How will they do as far as retooling some of these positions? Without maybe not a lot of draft picks, but they're well positioned in the draft to be able to pick up some solid starters, some guys who could really contribute in 2021.
Right.
This is a team that could still be they could have a lot of quality on the field in 2021 if they draft right.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It'll all depend on the draft, and to your point about, maybe not having as many picks as they would want, that scenario where we laid out a few weeks ago where they trade back from number 4 because a team needs to jump up and get the quarterback from North Dakota State, Trey Lance, that's still on the table, and you get more picks.
I think that's very possible.
Yeah, I think we'll see how the draft goes. Still a month away from that, but things are looking up for the Falcons for the first time, maybe really in a couple years. I wasn't
Super Bowl year,
yeah. I wasn't huge on their offseason last year. I know some of the other reporters at Atlanta Sports Unlimited were. I necessarily wasn't. So, but I would say this is the first time I think things are looking positive for Atlanta in some time.
I agree, absolutely, and. I know we all knew they weren't going to make a big splash in free agency. That wasn't going to be what this offseason was all about. But there's still quality on that field. Even with Mack, who signed elsewhere, the offensive line, you still got to do a little retooling. Fowler, we're going to find out whether he got the Aaron Donald push or whether he's actually capable of doing accomplishing some of these things without Donald sitting in the middle, everybody paying attention to. That's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, but, I like the fact that the Falcons were able to restructure both those deals, and it gives them a lot of flexibility moving forward. They really have a good opportunity here, drafting undrafted free agents where they can make a big impact. And I'm not so sold on the Saints. I think Falcons can make a move up in the division this year.
I think so too. I mean, it's going to be a very competitive division. It has been for a while, but the Buccaneers aren't really going anywhere, but the Saints very well could take a step back. We didn't talk about Drew Brees officially retiring last weekend. It happened a while ago, but that's happened since our last show. So the Saints are not going to be the formidable force they've been the last few years, and that's an opportunity for Atlanta to move up in the division. But we're out of time. Thanks for tuning in this Saturday. We'll be back next Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. Follow Tom on Twitter at TJ Pollen, me at DM Holcomb. Thank you, Chris, for being our producer. We'll be back next Saturday.